So Mike wanted to share a little bit about me, who I am, so I had to think of some stuff. I like longboarding, I like surfing, and I like the Old Testament. That's probably why I chose an Old Testament verse. And I also, oh, the title's not up on the screen. I also like odd titles, New Journeys, Wrong Turns, and the Bones of Joseph. It really is like, what the heck? I like doing those kind of things. It's also my mother's birthday, and because there's a camera there and she will be watching this, I want to wish you a happy birthday. I had some other things. If I don't shave in 2 weeks, I'll look like Grizzly Adams, and that's all I could think of, Mike. But you might be wondering, and as you've seen me kind of doing my internship around and seen me walking around, you're probably wondering, and the question's kind of been in your mind, and I'm sure of it, you've probably been thinking, does this guy work out? I'm sure he does. I'm sure he does. And you know, I might not look it, but back in the day, one of my hobbies was working out, and you might laugh at this, but, you know, school kind of took me away from this. But when I did go to the gym, there was always a dreaded time of the year, a year which most people loathe, who, you know, the regulars, they loathe, and it's New Year's. All of a sudden, our gym is filled with New Year's resolutions, people that are coming for that, you know, that jump back into it. And all of a sudden, I find myself just fighting over the gym equipment, and it was like, oh, you know, quit your resolution, go away. No, I want to encourage people on the resolutions. So we come to this moment of New Year's, a season of new beginnings and resolutions, a season of new directions in life. And when Mike asked me to preach, this idea of new directions and new chapters, it was in my mind. After all, we're entering this new season of entering into 3 services. We're looking for new pastors. And so, you know, as individual church families and church, we ask, what does the new year look like? What does the next chapter entail? I also, when I think of new beginnings and directions, I think of the Israelites. For the longest time, they were slaves in Egypt. And then all of a sudden, they're facing something new. Freedom. Freedom under God. And then they find themselves traveling on a new path to this promised land. And so when we read Exodus 13, 17 to 20, we are faced with this idea of new beginnings. Yet sometimes these new directions do not take the path that's expected. And so if you want to, I'll give you a chance to turn to Exodus 13, 17 to 22. It's also in the bulletin. I will be reading from the ESV version, so it won't be the same as the Church Pew Bible. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, although it was near. For God said, lest the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. But God led the people around by the way of the wilderness towards the Red Sea, and the people of Israel went up to the land of Egypt equipped for battle. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for Joseph had made the sons of Israel solemnly swear, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones with you from here. And they moved from Shechem and encamped at Etham on the edge of the wilderness. Have you ever been a passenger in a car? And I'm sure most of you have. But have you ever been a passenger in a car knowing your driver took a wrong turn? Knowing they're going the wrong direction? Do you say something? Do you just silently say nothing and just, well, maybe he'll find his way there? Do you point the driver in the right direction? And as we journey with God, would it not be nice that God made our path crystal clear when he takes us down an uncertain path or into a new direction? See, in this passage that I just read, we begin to face this feeling of uncertainty, that this new journey, things, they're not so crystal clear, that perhaps the Israelites, they could be thinking, well, we're going the wrong way. See, for the Israelites, they most likely would be scratching their foreheads at this moment thinking, where are we going? This promised land, God, that you are leading to us, it's north, not south. And we know this journey through the wilderness took more than 40 years. And I would be thinking after year 1, the Israelites would be thinking, well, are we lost? God, do you know where we're going? And I'm sure they would have been faced with these questions because the actual time it would have taken if they took the direct route was 3 to 4 days. Half day by bus, but they don't have buses, they have camels, and so, But 3 to 4 days by foot. All they had to do is go north through the land of the Philistines, and the promised land would have been quickly in their grasp. However, as they head south, beginning their very long journey in the desert, I'm sure they were thinking, God, I think we're going in the wrong direction. See, as we enter into new seasons in life, we believe the best route from point A to point B is a straight line. It's a direct route, direct course. But sometimes new seasons in our life bring us in a different direction and odd places. When our path forward does not seem like a direct route, we begin to question, God, are you there? Are we going the right way? And these questions I had to face last year as my life started to head in a really strange direction. Now, before all this, strange direction happened, and before I began to question God, where my path was going, I felt my path was going on a direct course forward. I had all my life goals planned out. I was dating a girl for 2 years, and we were talking about marriage. I was a year into my master's program. I was also getting the high 90s that I wanted in school, and the door to open to continue my study in a PhD level was there. I was excited for the direction my life was going. Tic-tac-toe, I had my life all planned out. All I had to do was jump through the hoops. But then, April 6, 2012 happened. Good Friday. While at work at the Gospel Mission, an altercation between 2 guests started where a couple of staff and myself, we had to step in to protect 2 of the guests. This event escalated very quickly. All of a sudden, I found myself planted face first on a car that was used as a battering ram. I've seen many movies where these stunt car drivers, they just, roll over the car and they land on their feet and then they're running again. But I want to let you know it's not that easy. And I thank God every day knowing that, things could have been worse. The fact that I landed on top of the car was a blessing from God because I knew any other way things could have been very bad. And the unfortunate part is because I hit my head on the car, I suffered from a post-concussion syndrome, something that I was unaware of for a very long time, and something that helped change the course of my direction of my life as life continued. See, at the end of the summer of the accident, the prospects of marriage disappeared as my best friend left my life. And then as my school year began, I found each final, each test after test, I failed. No matter how hard I tried, I just failed. And then those marks that I was once proud of, they plummeted for a semester. And the option of PhD, it closed. And month after month, some new problem would arise, some new curveball that would help change the course of my life further. And every time a new curveball entered my life, the direction of my life would continue to change. The journey from point A to point B, it was no longer a straight line, and I felt myself entering a strange journey of uncertainty. And here I was, a seminary student, learning about God, but yet I was questioning God. God, where are you? Where are you taking me? Perhaps you took a wrong turn in my life. Am I doing something wrong? See, with this verse, I came to the understanding that, like the Israelites, when new directions begin in life, we can sometimes begin to wonder if the direction God is taking us is the right direction. What happened to that? God, let's take the quick path north. It's the easy route. Why, oh why, God, are you taking us into the desert? And it would be nice if you made that path crystal clear. Yet when we read the story of the Israelites, we must remember that God remains faithful to his promises. They will enter the promised land. Yet, God sometimes leads us through an alternate route to get to that promise. See, God seeing ahead of the Israelites, knowing where he's going, knowing that quick path would bring them right in front of the Philistines. And as soon as the Israelites saw the Philistines before them, they would either run back to Egypt, hand themselves over to, the new slave masters, or they would die in battle. And so God knew he had to bring them on an alternate route to build them up. So sometimes God can take us on an alternate route that we might imagine to protect us. God also takes us in an alternate direction so that we might grow closer to him. I mentioned desert, and every time we think of desert, we think a place of misery. Ooh, the desert, I don't want to go there. It sounds, just empty. Yet, the biblical understanding of the desert, it was a place of intimacy. It was a place seen as a honeymoon spot for the Israelites and God. It was alone, one-on-one time with God. A place where they had to place all their trust in him, and a place where the intimacy between God and his people grew. And as we begin to find ourselves in the desert place, if we lean on God, we begin to discover a growing relationship. We also need to understand that while God was and is always faithful to his promise, the Israelites, they were not ready for the great promise. If you read the whole story of the Exodus, you quickly realize this. God has to take them on a scenic route of growth before they can grasp onto this promise. It was almost, these Israelites were almost like kids on a road trip in the back seat saying, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" They call these the grumblings, and here's one of them. In Exodus 14:11-12, they said to Moses, "Is it because there's no graves in Egypt that you've taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us to bring us out of Egypt? Is it not what we said in Egypt, 'Leave us alone that we might serve the Egyptians'? For it would have been better to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." And this is not a soul happening. It happens in Exodus 16:3. They grumble about going back to Egypt because they are hungry. In Exodus 17:3, they grumble about going back to Egypt because they were thirsty. Even in Numbers 11 and 14, they are still grumbling and mourning over the fact that they left Egypt. See, the promised land is a huge promise. It's also a huge leap of faith for the Israelites and a huge step that they have to step into. And it will take trust in the small things with God before they can trust in the big things. There's also a nagging question in my mind that comes into my mind as I hear the Israelites grumbling. Why in the world would they want to go back to slavery? And doesn't God have something better planned for them, this promised land, and all they're thinking about is going back to Egypt and slavery? And it's interesting, while the Israelites have this great promise and future, it seemed that the security of slavery felt safer than the uncertainty of the path God was taking them. They knew what was safe. And I wonder how often do we look back when God is trying to lead us forward to something new and something better. I personally have done this, especially last year. My life began a new journey, a journey of uncertainty. I would look back at how things could have been. My imagination of what they could have been, and thinking how my old journey was better than the new journey. But thinking back, was it? Was that new journey better? Looking back with a fresh perspective and distant eyes, the old life was perhaps not the best for me, and that God does have something better planned for me in my life. That perhaps there was bondage that God was removing me from. And even though my journey last year was not fun, I look back on that journey thinking, well, I needed that journey. And sometimes we need a journey before we can actually grasp onto what God has planned for us. The journey is this place between point A and point B. The problem is we elevate the point B, the successes, the goals, the rewards, we place these over the actual journey itself. But I'm convinced that the journey is more important than the goal, because the journey shapes who you are when you get to point B. The place in the desert where the Israelites had to travel through, it made them who they were when they got to the promised land. It made them ready. And this is why I do not think it is about the end, but rather the journey to point B in life. Because the journey is the place which God fosters growth. And even when life appears to be way off course. The reality in all of this is God does know where he's going. Even when life seems out of control or life takes a different course. It may not be crystal clear, but God gives us symbols of hope, reminders of where we are going. Even in the story of the Israelites, where they're heading further from the promised land, where they're heading into the desert, they have this reminder of where they're going. If we see this hope in verse 19. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him. And so usually when I go traveling, I take, flip-flops, sunscreen, maybe some shades, and I might, what else would I bring? Maybe the great bones of my ancestor. I mean, that seems like a vacation requirement. I mean, it's almost ridiculous that this is something you put on your checklist of a thing to bring when you're about to enter into a dangerous trek into the desert. But for the Israelites, this was a constant reminder of where they were going. Before Joseph passed away, he made his brothers make a promise. In Genesis 50, 24 to 25, and Joseph said to his brothers, "I'm about to die, but God will visit you and bring you out of the land to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob." Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, "God will surely visit you, and you shall carry my bones up from here." It's request that, hey, don't leave me behind, guys. Bring me along to this promised land. And it's a request that when God is ready to take the nation to the promised land, that they would not forget him no matter what in Egypt. Now that God has delivered Israel from slavery, they have these bones with them containing an oath. This oath that would have been a constant reminder of where they were going. No matter where or how far they would have been from the promised land, all they had to do is look at this box and say, well, we're going to the promised land to keep this oath. See, sometimes it's hard for us to see the end results when we start taking new paths or when the path goes through a desert place. And it's so easy for us to lose hope in these type of situations. But God continues to give us reminders even to this day. I mean, we have the Bible, the Word of God, a constant reminder that God loves us. And even in some of the darkest passages, God's still saying that. And then it's interesting that Jesus sets up the church, a constant reminder that we are not alone as we struggle together with life and faith. And last month, we had baptism here on the stage. And every time I see it, I'm reminded of the new life I'm going to get to participate, no matter how tough my life is at that moment. And when we partake in communion, we're not just remembering past events of what Jesus did on the cross, but we're also remembering the present reality of God's work in our life. And there's also a really cool promise that comes with it that we're reminded of. And as I stand before you today, I become another reminder as I share the word and part of my life story, that no matter what the circumstances are, that you are loved. Plain and simple. That no matter how out of control your life seems at the moment, you are not alone. God is leading you somewhere good. And when we read this biblical text, we know God is safe and trustworthy, even when the path is not crystal clear. See, these journeys, we need to embrace them, no matter how hard it is, because the journey is the destination where you will discover who you are and find your greatest growth. The journey is not about making your life better in the future. The journey is about the person you want to become. And it's very, very rare that you will find a great leader in society that has done great things. It's very hard to find a person that hasn't gone through one of these walks. Nelson Mandela. He spent time in jail. So even though the path may not be crystal clear, I know God has a good plan no matter what, no matter how lost I felt in my journey. In Romans 8:28, we read, "And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose." See, my biggest mistake when life threw me a curveball was to think that God did not have a plan in the desert place. But here I am before you, standing on this stage, and I have to say that me being here is a direct result of that journey. I probably wouldn't have met Mike sitting in that chair looking for, something new. And so I know God had a purpose in my life in that situation. And I'm glad of it. And so this might be cliche. See, God has a plan. And he has an amazing ability to turn lemons into lemonade. And that is my God. And I want to place my trust and faith in that God, knowing that no matter how out of control my life seems, he's going the right direction. So let's pray.